Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for jumping into another episode of the Marketing Natives. Whether you're watching on video or audio, we just really appreciate it and know that your time is super valuable. So thank you, especially as you probably clicked on this topic and you're like, dang, what are they going to talk about? Well, may surprise you, may not surprise you, but there is a lot of really good information in here to help you and your business navigate this lockdown. We're going to be talking about how to plan for 2021 and what this looks like for your business, things that you should consider if there is a lockdown. Hopefully this will not be a valid podcast, but we're going to still put it out. So things to plan for. We're talking about building an online presence, where you should focus your time on building that online presence, how it could help you grow your business, and more importantly, why. And then most importantly, we're going to be talking about the calming that you should have by planning and not panicking and understanding that this is temporary. So we're going to talk about things to help you so that you don't panic, or things that you can put into place so that it's not as big of a burden as what it was back in March of 2020. So all this and more. Hope you guys get a ton out of this episode. Check it out.
This is the Marketing Natives, providing actionable ways to grow, improve, and succeed in your business. And now, your hosts, Christian and Aaron.
First things first, I would say you need to plan. I think making sure that you understand the things that need to be in place in order for your business to sort of sustain for that time period. I think it's number one step. So even if this second lockdown doesn't happen, it'd still be beneficial for you to create this plan, have it written somewhere, have a plan of action, and try to create scenarios on what if this happens? What if it goes longer? What if it's shorter? What if there's absolutely zero business coming in? How are you going to be able to sustain your business? And I think doing it now, obviously it gives you an advantage where before, I don't think anyone was ready for a lockdown. It sort of came as a surprise for a lot of people, even for us. Luckily, I mean, we were able to adapt pretty quickly. But yeah, I think the very first thing that you need to do if you're thinking about, okay, what if the second lockdown really comes? It's just start planning.
And one thing that I'd listened to, what was it? I guess maybe it was June or July, and there was a guy who was interviewing Brandon Lucero, and regardless of who the person is, what he was saying is that, like, he's a financial guy, and he was saying, okay, so you need to have 6 months worth of business, and this is not revenue to kind of think about. But he's like, say it gets better in the fall, which would have been like October, November, which what they've found now is that it kind of is rolling. And the reason we're talking about a second lockdown, just to give context, is because people believe that once power changes hands and what's going on in the country with cases and stuff, that there may be a second lockdown, which is why we're having this. But what he was saying is that, like, people in March were planning for like the next 3 months, when really, if you're thinking about it, it's like, okay, doing a 3 month, 6 month, and then 12-month plan. And the people who had been doing the 12-month plan or figuring out the 12-month plan back in March or April are obviously in a much better position now because they planned for that long term. So for this one, it's like January, I guess, is really the time period that we would potentially see a change, like the end of January. And the talk right now is like maybe a 4-week, 6-week lockdown or whatever. But like planning for, like what Christian said, maybe a little bit farther, maybe if it's shorter, and how you can continuously bring in business, which we'll talk about it here in a second. But I think the best question to ask yourself is, what would you wish you would have done differently back in March, now that you have a little bit of time? So like we would have told, if somebody would have told Christian and I in January, hey, March 17th, the world's going to change completely, we would have been planning frantically to like plan for this because we didn't know what was going to happen. And we don't know what's going to happen in January either. I hope this, more than anything, as a side note, I hope this podcast is completely obsolete. I hope that it's not needed at all, and people are looking for a lockdown because they're thinking about some kind of church camp, like church lock-in or something like that, and not a lockdown of the economy. So planning is one thing, and that's got to be different for you, but planning for that 3 months, 6 months, 12 months for you, just loosely just writing it out and thinking about it. So the fact that you're listening to this podcast is huge. And then the second part, like I said, is just what would you have done differently in March, and if you get another chance to do something differently in January of 2021.
And I think when it comes to planning, I guess what things come to mind for you when you're thinking about, okay, I guess what are maybe some of the topics or things that I need to focus on?
Yeah, I think first off, people think about it financially, so the business, but keeping yourself employed or paid, your employees paid, and then what are the necessities? So financially, but then also like, okay, this could affect our employees. So how can we um, plan to have the conversation with them ahead of time? Like, hey, if this happens, this is our plan. Don't worry, we're not going to freak out. It's literally this is our plan. It's kind of like preparing for like a fire drill or like tornado. Hey, this could happen. A fire could happen. A tornado could happen. Hopefully, it doesn't. But this is what we're going to do, and that way nobody panics. So yeah, I think finances, personnel, and then personal too. Just having a conversation. I think one on one, depending on the size of your company. Like, hey, how is this affecting you personally? Because there may be things that are going on in the company that we don't know about, or that have been affected from it. So I think that's all I can think. Would there be anything else to add, I guess, to that? I don't know if I'm missing anything.
I mean, I was just thinking, I mean, obviously economic, I think you talked about your staff, your people. Obviously I think communication changes. So having to plan on how are you going to communicate with your people and your clients.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I
clients,
guess
that's a good one though. Like, I feel like we should definitely like the client communication too. Like, hey, we're preparing and just reassuring them. Like, if you're serving those people, like, not to freak you out, but we are planning so that you guys don't skip a beat. So we're working on your behalf to make it happen. I think that's something absolutely to note there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, communication with the client on what you're doing different, and how things are going to somewhat stay the same, hopefully. And obviously, I mean, I'm hearing what we're saying, and obviously there's going to be some companies that this won't work,
right,
for them. So, that's another thing that you're going to have to figure out is, this might not work 100%. It might mean that, you'll need to lay off some people, maybe even restructure the way that you do business. I think we saw it early on with restaurants and doing curbside pickup, and doing the sort of family style dinner packages of uncooked food that you just take home and cook it yourself. So I think there was a lot of really good creative ideas that came from that, and things that are probably going to stay with us forever, like curbside pickup, like
alcohol
integrated. Yeah. Alcohol to go. Those things are almost already integrated into the platforms, and, Yelp and DoorDash and Uber Eats. Like, now they just have options for curbside pickup. Even though we're not on lockdown anymore, like, those things are still available. So I think that those things are going to definitely stick around. So yeah, it's also thinking about, what things you can do creatively in your business to get more business, or maybe change or modify your services a little bit, or your offering a little bit, to accommodate for that. So hopefully I think that as far as like a planning, I think that's probably the most crucial is, I mean, if your business depends on brick and mortar being open doors, then, okay, how can you creatively shift that focus? Maybe selling online.
I was going to say, yeah, like, even like we had an influx of people who were like, we have a brick and mortar location. Can we move our business online? So like, if you're a clothing boutique, how can you build an online website? Like, it's still November, or depending on when you're listening to this, December. You have a couple, maybe 4 or 5 weeks from listening to this or whatever, like getting started on a new website to sell online. Maybe you pushed it, 6 months ago because you're like, like things got better. Like, we were only, locked down for so long, and then things got better. So things start to come back. But then you're like, I really don't want to go through that again. So like, what are the steps I could make to make that happen, or to shift more online?
Yeah, exactly. And then like, talking about online, what would be something that maybe everyone can do
Hmm.
on on social or
Well, I was gonna say, like, something we've preached, and if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, maybe you guys are first time, so thank you for listening. But if you've been listening for a while, you know that we're huge proponents of like getting on social media. And I feel like there's been a lot of people I've talked to who kind of feel bad because they've thrived during this time because they've built a brand. So I think just focusing now and like saying, okay, I'm going to get over the fear of doing video. I'm going to get over the fear of like getting on this platform, but just building some kind of online presence, even if it's just one platform. You're just like, look, my customers on Instagram and I'm a restaurant and I'm just going to go all in on Instagram Reels, or I'm going to go all in on IGTV or stories. And I'm going to build up my business right now and have one on one conversations with people. And that's going to sustain me for what's going on in the future. So I think that just building an online presence is something everybody can do. Like every business should be on social media. And the smaller you are, probably even is better because you can be, I guess, more ninja like. You can move quicker and like adapt to your customers. And I think that at that point, you're just putting yourself in a much better position to be successful. And I think, it's a lot of my opinion, but I believe that owners, if you're listening, obviously right now, most of you guys are business owners. The best business owners, or they do the best when their back's kind of up against the wall. So it's like, this is right now, if you're listening to this and you're planning these things right now and it doesn't happen, then great. But you have a potential lockdown and, weighing in on, you have a deadline. So when your back's up against the wall, like, what are you going to do? You don't want to go out of business. You want to innovate and you want to still continue to grow. So doing something like this may catapult you to that next level. And I think that's something everybody could do.
hmm yeah. Also, just thinking about like examples for us and some things that I guess change from that. Um, I think number one, it forced us to use the tools that we already had
Yeah.
and use them a little bit more efficient. So things like ClickUp, like our project management software. Now, like you actually go to projects, you go to clients, and you actually get to see a lot of information in there. Because when we were away, that was our main tool of communication. And then I think also time blocking our calendars.
Yeah, that started too.
That's something that started, during the lockdown where we were away from each other. So we kind of wanted to keep track to make sure that everyone's, building out their day like they're supposed to and be working on the things that they need to be working on.
Right.
And that sort of has carried through this whole time. Even today, we still do those things, which is really good. And yeah, I mean, it's like you said, like, I feel like we needed to to do those things. And
we never had the push.
Yeah, we never had to, and that really pushed us to be more efficient in those areas.
It also forced us to finish the training. Like it took, I think, to write out the training for like our Leads Accelerator program, to get to like go through a training. Like it took maybe 2 weeks to do it. But I think if we wouldn't have had like a lockdown and like forced us to do more business online, then it would have been, maybe by the end of the year. Like we kind of filled the gap with what's going on. And even so, like it allowed us, because you mentioned ClickUp, our project management, we started using it, but then we got rid of something else that I think hopefully has saved us a decent amount of time, which is another app we were using. We use Slack, we love Slack, but we got rid of Slack just because we abused it, I think, more so than use it as a tool. But we kind of cut that out. And I don't think that would have been possible if we wouldn't have made the shift to doing everything inside of ClickUp, because then it would have seemed like it was too far fetched to make that happen. So there's actually been a lot of good that's come out of it, and allowing us to plan for it would be really good. And it's, I guess the conversation for Christian and I, we've had 2 or 3 conversations about maybe planning out for what this looks like for the lockdown for us, because we want to do the same thing. We're not just going to say it. We need to practice what we preach. But I think one of the things for us is just also stepping our social game too. We used to have, I'm not saying our social media is bad. Hopefully you guys like our social media, but it could be better. Like we know we can be so much better. And I think that this may force us to say like, okay, let's take full advantage of how we bring in customers that way too.
And I mean, we have a lot of different revenue streams, and obviously local marketing academy comes to mind as far as like, okay, that's something that we should probably be working on, and push, during that time, where right now, the past, 6-8 months, we've done the local marketing academy workshops through Zoom, whereas before we used to do
it in person.
Do it in person and have to basically get a conference room, it costs money, and then food, which costs money as well. So now we're actually cheaper by doing it just through Zoom.
We can do it all over the country.
And we can do it all over the country. So I think that's definitely a huge opportunity for us. And that goes back to creating just different revenue streams or figuring out your services and accommodating for that. So I mean, that would be a huge opportunity for us to concentrate more on that and trying to expand that too. And I think that would definitely help us and cushion the loss of other clients or services that we would normally get during that time.
Just to clarify for Local Marketing Academy, like that's it's over Zoom, but basically each month we present on a topic like Christian did actually ironically today about Instagram Reels, like basically everything you needed to know and like walked you through it, answered questions. And so like each month we have a topic that we speak about and then a private Facebook group. So it's a really great concept. We just haven't grown it to what the full potential should be. But if you're interested in that, you should there'll be a link into this, but I think it's localmarketing.academy, but check it out. It's not a plug for that, but maybe of interest to you. But I think the one thing that comes to mind whenever we're just like thinking about notes or talking about this is I don't like the fear mentality. So whenever you're thinking about something like this, if somebody says lockdown or quarantine or like any of those words, they all have like a negative connotation. So let's try to like flip that on its head, which I know is sometimes hard to do, but I think really to be successful throughout this whole thing, if you're planning for it and it does happen, that you feel at ease, but more so that this is temporary. Like it's not like we're going to be locked down forever. Like it's just literally not going to happen. What people were talking about before, it's just speculation, but 4 to 6 weeks, which seems like a long time, but it's 4 to 6 weeks of your life, which is just like a little, it's like a blip in the radar. So this is temporary and it's not forever. So I think that's something to think about, like how to navigate a lockdown is that this will end. It's not like the quote unquote pain is forever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's something very important to keep in mind. And to me, almost the whole 2020 feels like a blip. It's weird. It feels like a blip and then it doesn't feel like a blip. It feels like forever. But I think it feels more so like a blip because of the lockdown and it just feels like you lost a few months of your life, like doing nothing. But yeah, I think keeping hope and knowing that, it's temporary and it's not going to last forever. And that knowing that you're prepared, right? That you have a plan, that you have options, that you have different ideas, and that you're willing to persist and push through. That's how normally great things happen. So
yeah, I was actually, it's ironic because there's a lot of irony going on in this podcast. I was actually talking this morning about like just looking at the number one reason that business owners are successful, and this is something to think about, is not talent or skills or team or anything. Like the number one reason that business owners are successful, quote unquote successful, and stay in business is more so perseverance. So that's also should just play into this right here. And kind of a side note, whenever you were talking earlier, I was thinking of like, it's been kind of a blip, but to me, like, it's just like certain songs like remind me of certain months. Usually it's just like a period of time, but it's like certain songs remind me of a certain month. And like your birthday this year seemed like it was, so Christian's birthday's in February. It just felt like it was like 2 years ago. Because it just, it was in February. So it's like everything, there was pre-COVID. It's like I ran a marathon in January, but like I remember, but it's like that was before. And like even now I like wake up sometimes and I'm like, oh, like this was just a bad dream. Like I can go do my normal stuff. And it's, we've talked about this before, but like we're doing a lot of the same things. It's just, there's a little bit more precaution, but things are like opened back up. Things are quote unquote back to normal-ish, but there's still this, this thing that's not completely normal yet. So it's, I don't know. I feel like it's been this false year of 2020. Like we're walking in kind of a weird spot, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, hopefully out of anything you got a couple of main nuggets here, really good information of what you should do. I know we didn't talk specifics, but at least hopefully gave you the ideas to go and just grab a pen and paper, grab an iPad, grab your computer, and just start planning, thinking about what this looks like for you in January, building an online presence, and then remembering that this is just only temporary. So like, even if you didn't take anything away from this or you don't take any action at all, it still is only temporary. It's just to be thinking about the future for your business, because the sooner that you can think about it, the less like stressful or anxious that it will become. So. And if you guys are listening to the podcast for the first time, thank you so much. Don't know how you came to us. Podcast doesn't tell us specifics on that, but thank you so much for listening. If this is let's jump to this. If this is your first time, rather, please make sure that you subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, you're on Facebook, like it. If you're on Instagram, make sure you follow us, YouTube, podcast app, wherever you found us, make sure that you subscribe, because we put out new episodes of the Marketing Natives every single Monday. And if you've been listening to us for a while and you're like, okay, dang, I've been listening to these guys, but this episode really resonated with me. I really needed this push to help with the lockdown and the planning, and this is just super clear and concise information, then please go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us an honest rating and review. This is what really helps us to reach more people, and also just help us to improve the podcast. So again, thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure to stay safe, and if you have anything to add to this, we'd love to hear that. So just shoot us a message over on Instagram at BitBranding. Thank you guys, and have an awesome rest of your day.
The Marketing Natives podcast is a production of BitBranding.